man's world, whatever that means.
In what ways do you feel connected to your African heritage?
Setting the record straight about men's mental health.
When I drive past brothers on the street that are homeless, I say, that's me, that's us.
To plant trees that other people are going to be able to enjoy the shade from.
Organizing events that spark the Africans.
Meeting on this platform is part of bridging that gap.
A man's world with Christopher Oji Darkins.
Welcome to It's a Man's World, whatever that means. I'm Christopher O.G. Darkins, your host, Chief Justice for Y'all Life Nation, and Chairman of the Invictus Foundation. On these episodes, we're going to talk about bridging the transatlantic divide, how to create connectivity between Africans who have been forcibly displaced and lodged in the Americas, and those who are still on the continent and have held it together for such a long time. In these next two episodes, we're going to talk about the issues that affect the relationship, create economic opportunities, and bridging those gaps that allow us to build a more prosperous and powerful Africa, collectively, a homeland for us all. Let's get to these next two episodes. Let's engage in a dialogue and a conversation, and let's come out with solutions. Because if it's a man's world, this is what men are supposed to do.
All right, welcome to It's a Man's World, whatever that means. This is our second installation. It's a show in which we bring men together, African men, together to talk about the issues that we face in kind of crossing the transatlantic divide, bridging the gaps between African American communities, wherever that is, North, South, Central America, with African communities on the continent. Focusing on reconnecting, developing economic ties, and reestablishing a homeland for Africans that have been forcibly displaced from the continent. We had a very interesting show a couple weeks ago where we had a very engaging discussion, and a lot of those individuals are back today to continue the conversation. But we have two new guests on the show today. And I will give them a brief chance to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Foster.
How y'all doing, man? My name is Abdul Foster. I was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I actually currently reside in Houston, Texas, in America. For those of you that aren't here, I started off, my trade was a personal trainer, performance coach to be exact. Trained a bunch of athletes from professional football players, that's American football, all the way down to baseball, soccer, you name it, everything. And now I currently I'm a co-founder in a tech platform that's designed specifically for trainers. And that's pretty much who I am and what I do.
Thank you, Abdul. A couple questions. Have you ever been to Africa?
Never been, no.
And what's your sentiment towards going to the continent?
Since I was young, the first book I ever read was a book by Anta Sheikh Diop. It was called Egypt Revisited. For those of you, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that book, but I've had a deep desire to go see the pyramids since I was a kid, and it just sparked me on a journey into the motherland. And I want to go. I've never been, but it's definitely in the plans to make it out there once I kind of accomplish a couple things here, and then the next venture for me is to find my way back.
Right, great. Have you had an opportunity? I know you've seen the questions and the overview. Have you had an opportunity to watch last week's conversation?
I honestly did not. These last few weeks have been extremely hectic for me as far as business is concerned. We're actually in our seed funding round right now for our tech platform. And so I didn't get an opportunity to actually go over everything, but just kind of talking to you, Chris, I heard it was pretty good. So I just want to catch back up.
Okay, perfect. The second guest today that is joining us for the first time, Mr. Julius Brown. Julius, how are you doing? If you take it off mute, we might be able to hear you. Still on mute. You're saying some good stuff, though, I can tell, just by the way the words are coming out of your mouth.
A very pleasant good morning or good afternoon, wherever you guys are from. I'm Julius Nairi Brown. I am originally from Kingston, Jamaica, currently residing in Toronto, Canada.
Okay, Julius, do you consider yourself a Canadian or a Jamaican?
I actually consider myself an African.
Great, perfect. So, Julius, you've been engaged in a project over the last, I'm not sure how long, but I just saw it on Kinganda, reached out to you and had a brief discussion. Can you tell us a little bit about that project relative to East Africa that you're doing?
So I went to Kenya last year and fell in love with the place. So much so I bought some property down there, and then I went back with my uncle and my cousins because they wanted to see, what is this man talking about this place? Let me go see what this Africa is all about. So went back with them as well. No, I want to permanently move there. And that's when I came up on some hurdles. One of which is you can register your company in Kenya, but you can't actually work for that company unless you have a work permit. To get an investor's work permit, you need 100K US in the bank, in a Kenyan bank. So just the entire process of it was challenging, to say the least. So I am working through the process. I would say 75% complete at this point. But I decided anybody else who wants to go home shouldn't really have to go through this. $100,000 is not easy to come by. You know, someone with a bright idea, maybe $5,000, $10,000 should be able to move to a country and start operating some kind of business, being able to uplift the local community they're in. So most people said, go to Ghana. Ghana gives you right of abode. It's easy. It's not as challenging. But unfortunately, I got rooted in East Africa. That's where I feel I'm not religious by any means, but there's something connecting me there that I cannot explain. So I came up with a project called Credea. It's the Coalition for the Descendants of Enslaved Africans. And we want to go back to East Africa. Actually, I've gotten requests to make it bigger, make it Africa-wide. We've gotten a request. So we're seeking right of abode for any descendants anywhere in the world who wants to go back to Africa, given the opportunity to live and operate businesses without some cumbersome bureaucracy. So that's what we're looking for. Basically, the same arrangement that Ghana has, we would love to see that throughout Africa. But right now, I'm focusing on East Africa. So we have a petition online. The idea is to get 10,000 signatures on the petition. Then we're going to present it to the chair of the EAC, in addition to all the leaders of the countries within the EAC. That's the East African Community. And people are saying to me, petitions have no power. And I think they're misunderstanding. It's not about the actual petition. It's creating the top of mind awareness that we want to come home and demonstrating the positive influences, the impact we will have on not just the region, but local communities. We'll be quicker to impact the everyday continental person wherever we are, because we're going to be hiring people. And most of us are Pan-Africans. I'd say 99% of us who want to go back to Africa are Pan-Africans. So we're there for the benefit of the continent. We're not the new set of colonizers. So that's what the petition is about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. Did you get a chance to watch the last episode?
No, not yet. No, unfortunately.
Okay, good. So we're gonna add two newbies to the conversation, but we're not gonna go backwards because I think you guys will pick up quickly. And what I will do now is give 90 seconds to each one of the returning guests to kind of talk a little bit about their thoughts from last week and anything that they want to discuss this week. And we'll start with Verite, who is also on the continent here.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm by names of Chibairo Karangwa Verite, but you can call me Verite. I know the other names are kind of hard. And I'm a fourth-year medical student and I'm also the Vice President of Internal Affairs in our Medical Students Association in Rwanda. Last time was really great honor to join the conversation, and I hope to keep learning more and contributing to today's conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Verite. Mr. Johnson.
Good morning. Ricardo Johnson, originally from Chicago, Illinois, United States. I currently live in University Park, Texas. I am the founder and CEO of Muse Health. It is a national healthcare organization working with major insurers and hospital systems to provide coverage services and representation to underrepresented groups. I also own R2 Global Supply and R2 Business Development Group. And I actually, Julius, would love to talk to you about this program that you're saying. So, Chris, when it is appropriate, I have some ideas. So, but Ricardo Johnson.
I think it'll be appropriate in short order, as it sounds like you listed something that you want to discuss, and we're here for solutions. And so that'll certainly be right after Kinziah Styles gets his 90 seconds.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, and welcome new guests, new people, Kinziah Styles. And I'm just happy to be here on the platform and to be able to add my 2 cents. You know, the wonderful platform. I work with the Y'all Life Nation and a good friend of Chris's, and, you know, do the anthropology where we, you know, just do the study of the religious relationships and community relationships, mentality of our people, how it correlates to our environment, how it correlates to our culture, and how we unify, come together, how we think, and deal with our history and past and unite us together. So, you know, I'm glad to be here. Yeah, everybody needs to watch these clips and stay fired up, stay sharing them throughout the you know, the universe, the internet and social media platforms. So sharing and relating, talking to people, bringing new people to it, I think the thing that we're doing, and I like the platform. So good to be here.
Thank you, Kinziah. Okay, so we're about 3 minutes ahead of schedule. So Ricardo, would you like to go ahead and
Julius, Chris had mentioned that you were joining the show when he and I spoke this week. I'm actually going to be in DC Wednesday through Sunday this week, from the 20th to the 24th, meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus. These are Black politicians from all around the United States. And one of the salient points that we are going to be addressing, aside from my day job, healthcare, is this concepts around reparations and how do U.S. communities address the historic atrocities meted out on communities of color, specifically Black communities. And I think it would be a really interesting initiative for local communities to support financially, whether it be through commerce, through some types of other things, where they could support individuals like yourself. And actually, I was just in Toronto a week before last. I do actually a lot of business in Toronto, so maybe the next time I'm there, we can break bread. But I think it would be a really interesting way to bring commerce to these respective communities. And, you know, availability is the best ability. Sustainability is the second best ability. And being able to bring U.S. economic development as a bridge to address, and you know, if I'm Ghanaian or Kenyan or this, that, and the other, this idea around this influx of individuals without some degree of sustainability, while I completely agree with you, if I'm trying to see things from their perspective, I can see how they would say, you know, listen, we don't want to just have anybody coming over here. We need to be able to do that. But I do think that there is a way, given that there is a real initiative. In fact, we're seeing nationally a lot of counties, cities, states looking at reparation. I think this is a way for reinvestment to occur, where when we, whoever we are, Pan-Africans, arrive in these communities, we come with some degree of support. We come with some degree, and I think it does dovetail. And I actually put together a 15-point outline on how, if I were hired, and I do business development for a living, if I were trying to create business on the continent, given my expertise and experience working as a U.S. business owner on the continent, here's some of the things from my own experience. But I do think it would be a really interesting way to address the $100,000 issue, where we could look to community leaders in Canada and the United States and in other places to bring economic development. It benefits those communities. It benefits the governments in which we want to repatriate. And I think it addresses this desire to have stability. So that was an idea. Now, again, there could be, and reasonably so, this idea that, well, what comes with that money? What comes with that? So that's something that would need to be worked out. But I do think that there's some there. And so that's just off the top of my head. Again, I would love to be a part of that conversation. I do think it's something that would be worth bringing up while I'm in DC, meeting with Black political leaders to say, hey, this is a way where you're not just sending out checks to people, where there really is some degree of investment being made, reinvestment being made, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's just my idea that when I heard what you're talking about, I thought, well, you know what, there might be an opportunity here to do that.
No, I appreciate that, and I welcome any assistance. But what I will say is this: on my website, we have another project that's in the infancy, and it is a mental decolonization Saturday program for children. And someone offered to give me funding, but wanted me to change certain words. Mental decolonization, they didn't approve of it. They would rather international inclusiveness. And I'm like, no, that's not what this is. So that's my only thing where start accepting funds from, especially government, is it comes with strings attached.
Absolutely.
So, right. And in terms of economic growth, I'm all for that, because that program, the second phase of that program is, it's a children program, but eventually we get the parents in and we'll be giving them grants. It's not a lot of money. Each person might get $500, which is 50,000 Kenyan shillings, and to start a business. They're going to have to come up with some kind of business plan, but we're going to fund the first initial thing that they can start. So that's another aspect of CREDEA that we're working towards. I don't mind assistance. I find assistance does come with strings, and that's my concern.
No doubt.
Ricardo, that's you make some very good points, and it actually touches on three of the questions that we have on the Global African Question Sheet. Number 4, which is, how can African descendants in America contribute to improving economic opportunities and cultural exchange with African communities? Number 7, are there any specific initiatives or programs you believe could enhance cooperation and collaboration between African descendants across continents? And number 9, what actions do you think should be taken to effectively address social disparities and inequalities within African descendant communities? When the Asians or Chinese come over to the U.S., they get supported with backing from the Chinese government. It's a sovereign fund or some other mechanism. It also happens for a lot of European countries as well. They will support them with backing, financial backing, in order to be productive and effective in those countries. As a means of reparative justice, maybe there is some type of guarantee program or funding program that they can provide for African Americans who are going back to the diaspora to invest and set aside a specific sum of funds, because what it does, as you said, it prevents them from just giving out checks, but it has a focus, right? It's intended to improve the actual communities that they're going to repatriate into. And it also supports the individual that is kind of ripping himself away from from all of the economic equity that's been built up in the Americas, what they're walking away from. And then the second thing is you know, there's this consideration for those in our communities that are somewhat dependent on the system. And one question I'd have, does it matter if they're here and dependent on the system or on the continent and getting funded by the system that they're dependent on now? So consider welfare funding and how much is spent every year. If, you know, we said, hey, look, for the next 5 years, you know, we'll take those individuals, put them into programs on the continent, get them working, make them productive, put them into businesses, but we want that funding reallocated towards projects that we're sponsoring on the continent. Those are some thoughts, but let's open it up and talk about it. People, raise your hands if you got any thoughts. Let's hear them. And there is a specific button, Abdul, for raising your hand. It's at the bottom, and it says raise your hand. But I saw you raise your hand, so you're good.
My apologies, Chris. I mentioned to you, I'm totally sorry, man. It's my son had a football game yesterday, and it got canceled due to rain, and they rescheduled it today. So I do have to take him to it. He's with me right now. I'm so sorry. I would love to stay with you all and kind of navigate all of this, but hopefully next weekend schedules kind of clear up a little bit better. But I look forward to kind of hopping on with you all next time. But again, my apologies. I just wanted to make that known. So I will reach out to you, Chris, and we'll kind of reconvene on it.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. All right.
All right. Have a good day.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is important, I really respect Julius's response, and I think it really speaks to the integrity of his efforts. If you take a look at Israeli power in the Middle East, the standing army they have, if you look at, in fact, most armies in the Middle East, including Afghanistan, what you will find is Afghani or Taliban soldiers using U.S. weaponry. The billions and billions of dollars that were left behind when President Biden removed the soldiers essentially created an environment by which our enemy, our stated enemy, the United States government's stated enemy, now has U.S. weaponry to essentially keep themselves safe against invasion from the United States. And if you look at, Netanyahu, the power that he wields inside of Israel is in large part due to investment from both Jews and as well as the military might afforded him through their strategic relationship with the United States. And these are, whether you ask if the Trump administration, the Obama administration, or the Biden administration politically align with Netanyahu, it would be yes or no, depending on what administration you were talking about. But what these governments did was they recognized that there was value to be provided, even if that value had some cost. So when the Biden administration said that they were going to withdraw from Afghanistan, what the Taliban decided to do was stand down and just let them leave because they didn't want to get the United States angry and make them stay longer and so on and so forth. And then when they left, they took over. So this idea around this purity of concept, there's not a lot of precedent for it. If we are talking about turning something in or nothing into something, something has to be added to nothing to make something happen. And so where that wealth comes from, where those revenues that money comes from, is an unanswered question. The fastest way has strings attached, as Julius very accurately said. It's interesting to hear the variation between the changing colonization versus embracing international, and I think there is a distinction in those differences. But what I wanted to say is, is that when you talk about the establishment of anything, it becomes this question of what are you willing to give in order to get these things? And that is the challenge of all leadership. And so, I'm going to be really curious to watch. And Julius, you will have, my support, man. I'm super excited about what you're talking about. I think it is absolutely necessary, and even your response to the point demonstrates the purity in your heart, which I think is the first test of leadership, sacrifice, and a willingness to make a decision about, hey, does it make more sense for us to go slow and stay pure to our message and this, that, and the other, or will we do what has been done over time memorial, where we say we're going to do business with the devil because the devil makes it possible, but this, that, and the other. And so I'm curious to find out what the answer is going to be there, because compromise is the path to hell. And so, what you'll decide to do will be really interesting to watch.
Mr. Styles.
I was gonna say, absolutely, I agree. Getting the petitions and getting people involved, raising awareness for what, whatever it is in the future, whatever it becomes that we build together. I'm more of a project management, boots on the ground, entrepreneurship, grassroots, developing people groups, building up support from the bottom up, foundation up, going to our individual communities and people, and creating the understanding within our network or global resources from the bottom up. Now, and I think that once you have that, like you said, the petitions and the names and the not fundraisers, but the groups of people, then you can create the fundraisers, or you can create the sponsors, or get the sponsorship and support. And then they're going to ask, what is the what? And I think that just me, I've been to Africa, me and my family, like I said last week, we went there in December last year. And I think that some of the people in my community here, just in Houston, talking with them, some of the problems is just they need is passport expedition. So if we can address things like passports, right? Plane tickets, getting plane tickets, just what's the cheapest ways to fly, and getting people over, back and forth, that's travel. Room and board and locations, dealing with the room and board and locations on sites in different areas that we travel to. And then when you get there, what are the jobs and the details, the developmental projects that we'll be having people to work with and work on. And these are the things that I'm, wanting to address and talk about and learn about with, group of high power, high IQ, and versed men, as you put together the panel, and of course reaching out to other people within our community. I don't think it's necessarily a situation where we're talking about dealing with making a deal with the devil, but I think that it's definitely, we don't want our community to be subjugated or subject to things that we cannot get out of, debt. We don't want debts. When you build a project and do a project that's debt free and you own it, then that's what it may be a smaller scale. We can't compete with what capitalism and the Europeans have built. Ours may not look as beautiful, but it's home, it's ours, and we own it and we manage it. So we may not have the, all of the beautiful pillars and everything in place, or whatever you want, you may have in your imagination here in the States there, but we will have something that we own and we've built and that we manage. And I think that's better. So that's what I'm.
So I hear a couple of things here. I'm going to pierce through a lot of the soft talk. I hear a couple of objectives that need to be facilitated. And again, the name of this show, It's a Man's World. whatever that means. And the intention is to demonstrate that as men, we can take control of the situation and bring it to some type of conclusion, or at least put the effort towards it, some responsibility for it. One is 10,000 names on a petition. It would behoove us to consider what type of resources we have, and it's probably relationships that we have that can help facilitate getting 10,000 names on a petition as notable as the one that Julius is talking about. But there's a couple of points in there, excuse me, that I think everybody would probably want to have a chance to speak on. Is, what are the conditions that you're negotiating in terms of with these countries that this petition is targeting? And then what is the scope? Like, how many nations is it covering? And is it covering the nations that we, feel like need to be fully addressed? Because we should, if we're going to put resources behind it and leverage relationships and capital, et cetera, then, we should make sure that we get the impact that everybody benefits from. And then the second initiative is, Ricardo mentioned that he has a meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus, and one of the items that he intends to discuss is this whole concept around reparative justice and or creating ties between the U.S. and Africa in a way that African Americans control it, as opposed to it being determined by Euro-American interests, it be determined by African American interests. And I think there's no better place to start than the Congressional Black Caucus. So let's pivot and let's talk about those things. First, let's talk about the petition, the scope, the conditions that you're trying to negotiate, and let's see if we can come to some type of conclusion that we can all get behind.
So the conditions are really not that much. What we're asking for is the right of abode. Simply means the right to live in the land and to operate businesses in the land. That is all the petition is asking about. Mm-hmm. So it's basically an immigration process that is afforded to descendants of enslaved Africans. That's really all it is. Because we understand that a lot of these countries are poor and there's not much resources they can offer us. It's more about what can we do for you? In terms, yes, I need to make sure my family is okay, but my greater family has also got to benefit from me coming home. Really, that's what we're asking for. In terms of countries, as I said, we started with the EAC because from my research, they seem to be the more cohesive of all the other groups in Africa. They basically have a free trade agreement between themselves right now. Ugandans can cross over into Kenya, can cross over into South Sudan, and it's not as hectic as trying to cross from, let's say, Benin to Togo to Ghana. Whereas ECOWAS passport don't really do much for them on that side, but your East African passport has benefits. So that's why I was targeting that particular group. But I have people from who talk to me about Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe. And I said, I have no issues sending the petition to every leader in Africa, if that's what ends up happening. But my primary goal at this point is East Africa. Mm-hmm. Number one for me, Kenya is well developed. The crime rate is well, for me, I'm Jamaican, it's negligible to me. And the infrastructure there is unbelievable. There's a thing called M-Pesa. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. It is like Apple Pay on steroids. Yeah. Payment system. And it's easy to do business, to transact business in Kenya once you have the opportunity to run that business. And Uganda is also opening up. I know Rwanda is very easy to get to go and work. And from what I can tell, a Black American can go to Rwanda and set up a business in under a day. It's not that difficult. But that doesn't extend to the rest of the region.
Yeah, and it's not. It seems to be simple, but it's not easy in Rwanda. But a couple of points I want to make. You mentioned the right of abode. When you talk about a right, you're talking about all the incidental rights and privileges that are associated with that. So the right of abode, if it's technically a right, then there shouldn't be an immigration process. You should be able to go in and out freely, right? There's another thing to consider is that, you know, most of these African countries have what they call customary law. They have the traditional law, then they have the they have the civil law, then the customary law, which basically says that if you are a part of this tribal group, you're allowed to operate under customary law or tribal laws. Have you ever considered that, you know, we would want, and you know, this, I take this from actually what Ricardo had said in our last conversation, is he said, this tribe, my tribe right here, right? It struck a chord in me. We are a tribe, right? All up and down the Americas. We're all one tribe with maybe slightly different, what's the subgroup of a tribe? Clans, slightly different clans. But if, you know, what if we asked Kenya and Rwanda and all these other countries to recognize us as an ancient tribe and allow us to live under our own customary law, which we'd have to define what that is, but it would, the challenge of being subjected to a myriad of regulatory schemes across East Africa that aren't mature enough, right? Because what they try to do is they try to emulate America, but they put these laws in place and they're not at the same level that America's at in terms of development, right? The robber barons have already, you know, officialized themselves. So what are your thoughts on that?
We have to be careful, I think, seeming a bit heavy-handed. When it comes to mentioning tribes, you can go, even the word tribe, my experience is Kenya right now. You can go down a very slippery slope there. So it's a word I would avoid altogether. I mean, my friend Verta from Rwanda can probably speak a little bit more on that in terms of what tribalism is like there. So I would stay away from that, in my opinion. I would literally limit it to the right to enter and leave whenever I want and operate business. We are, our experience in the West, we've developed a little bit different. We just need, we have a thing in Jamaica, I would say, you give us an inch, we're going to go for the mile. We just want that in. We will accomplish what we need to accomplish for ourselves. We don't need to be organized. We will fit in their culture, in their tribes, because I can guarantee you, they see themselves, a lot of people see themselves as their tribes first, then they're Kenyans, then they're Africans. Whereas with us, we didn't know our tribe. So I get why you're saying we should consider ourselves as a tribe, but we didn't know our tribe. So we're just Black people. For them, tribalism there is a whole different level. I don't want to get off topic, and I just wouldn't go down that road.
I think you're on topic, and Verite has a point in, and I think our biblical anthropologist, Mr. Stiles, might have a counter to that, whether or not we know what tribe we're from. Verite, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think what Mr. Ojiro is trying to say is maybe the Bantu people, something like that, that all the people who were moved to the US were under the Bantu people and not specifically the small tribes like the one we had before the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. And he was trying to say that if we can privilege having our own defined document explaining how we want to operate in Africa, it would be a little bit easier. And what I was thinking even before he talked about this point were two things. You said about the East African community, and also I thought about the African Union. So the African Union brings together all African states except like one or two, I guess. And most of the times they do not have a lot of power to impose things on the countries. But when that's a nice platform to explain things and get to know which countries are interested in such kind of initiative and which countries are not interested. Yeah, and that's the first thing. We can maybe get a little bit into that in the discussion to come. But another thing is also having a consultant, maybe a lawyer or someone who is in Rwanda who knows about the legislation clearly, because I'm sure that you guys are really good with the legislation in the US or in other countries where most of the things are clear, they go within the system, like it is written. But in Africa, sometimes it changes. And sometimes you need that person who is in that country, who is ready to dialect and say, yeah, the law says this, but like, for example, I've been in Uganda for about 3 years, but what's written down is not what's being followed. The same to Kenya. Kenyans are people who have already defined things that are way ahead of in East Africa, they're way ahead of other countries. But what's written, they don't follow it. I know some investors who go there and really get the permit while they do not have the 100K. But I was also trying to read about Rwanda. Rwanda is way more difficult to operate, like Ojia was saying. I was reading at the Rwanda Development Board who issues the investment certificates. International investors are supposed to have $250,000 to be able to invest in Rwanda. And the local investors have to have $100,000 to be able to obtain the investment certificate. And they also say that the international investors are going to be treated like the local investors. But here is what I tell you. Some people just come and they do not define themselves as investors. They define themselves with some other kind of business, I don't know, business term. For example, they are opening a made in Rwanda business. This is something that is being promoted in Rwanda. If you have that idea, they're not going to charge you or to put some of the restrictions there. If you come to Rwanda trying to promote the tourism sector, there will not be, I think if you're working in tourism, there will not even be any taxes to you for about 5 or 3 years. But you cannot know all these clauses within the law without having a consultant helping you to recognize this. And those were my 2 points. Approaching the East African community and also the African Union to present about this initiative, which will then direct us to which countries are more interested in having African descendants coming back in, who understand that this is really important. Then from there we move to countries, country by country, and explaining and looking at how we can fit into the local communities. So having our own document that defines well gives us a platform to leverage them to accept these terms, and that will make it easier for people who are coming down here. And I would like to say this: do not disrespect the part of being organized, because when you're organized, then people respect what you're doing. What I can say is that you can be organized and then make the organization simpler for people who are coming back. So when you make it simpler, it sounds disorganized, but it's not. It's organized because it's been defined, it's been presented in a certain way. But then it's simpler for people, which some people will define as disorganized, but it was already defined before. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Veritas. Excellent points. Kenny Styles.
Yeah, I think that with the petition, when you talk about tribes and you talk about organization, there are a lot of details that go into this soup. You know, when you talk about the conversation that we're having is multiple conversations, because we're dealing with money, power, respect, heritage, history, culture. You know, when you're talking about quote unquote Black people, and when you talk about quote unquote Africa, and you talk about assets and uniting and things like this, this goes against the core of what our history, everything that we have come to know and been raised with understanding of with the slavery mindset and the situation of the oppression. So if we're talking about utilizing currencies or money to help our community and our people, we have to understand that there are powers to be and controls. Like I said, when you turn on one light switch, you might turn off another person's lights. Africa is a very critical ground. It's a very critical country and a critical place. African Americans, we are like the key. We are like a key. If we don't have a plan, and if we are reactive, there's a major opportunity in the petition that I feel that I don't think it should. I don't want it to be lost. And I think that if we take our time with this petition and actually write down detailed, proactive, not reactive, but proactive initiatives, things that we want, things that we want to put in play and that we were going to do, then we can get more of our community involved. Okay, because it's already, believe me, Africa is already in motion. There are people already buying. There are people already building, doing everything that we're talking about. It's already being done. You know, we're just a small pebble in the large ocean, you see. So my thing is, who are we? What are we talking about? And what are we doing? And where do we fit in with our conversation and with our connections, with our small circles? And how do we make our impact important with our community and our people? You know, we may reach before we die, 2,000 people or, 200 people or whatnot, and make a difference in that area. But at least we identify these core objectives, made moves on it, and help those 200 to 2,000 people. So we have to definitely be proactive. And if we don't have a plan, a direct plan and mission and understanding of who we are, our connections and our circles, somebody else will give us a plan and somebody else is going to control that money, that power, and they're going to have that respect and detail those things. And we're going to be sitting there on the steps looking at everything being managed and controlled out of our hands again. So the part of the conversation is not just to make ideas and make things, and then to hand everything over. It is actually for us to be involved with our community, with our dynamics, from the knowledge that we have. And that's why like I said, I'm more of a boots on the ground person, because I feel like if we're not the people that we're talking to and communicating with and working with and bringing them to our circles, within our circles, then we're going to get back scattered and separated and segregated. And then it's all for wash. It gets back confusing again. So I like to simplify. I like to detail. And as a project manager, these are the type of things that I look for.
Thank you, Kenny. If I could just say,
right. No, go ahead. Sorry, I was looking for the raise hand button, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. So you got something to say. I'll make a comment, then I'll hand the floor to you. A couple of stats I wanted to throw out here. $1.4 trillion in purchasing power by Black Americans in the United States. Okay. If you spread that across the entire Americas, you're probably looking at $2 trillion. Total debt of Africa combined is probably close to 1.5 trillion. Right. So 1 year of refocusing the consumptive power of African Americans across the Americas, African Americans across the Americas, could wipe out the total debt of all countries in Africa. So we just decided to buy from Africa. So, I think it's, if you invest in a company without getting some type of agreement on what your stock position is going to be, you might find yourself losing out on the equity after you put the money in, right? And I think you might find a similar situation in Africa, is that you can come and say, hey, I have all these resources I'm going to dump into your country and into the communities that are there. But when that money is gone and there's no more money for you to continue to invest, what rights do you have, and then what leverage do you have? You might still be building equity, right? But nobody can actually, you really know the value of the equity. The individuals there don't quite know, et cetera, but you want an opportunity to be able to monetize that and be able to convert that into whatever currency of value you consider to be beneficial. So I think, at the outset, it's good to say, these are the things we bring to the table, right? As individuals, as a collective group, and then, once we step to this CBC conversation, Congressional Black Caucus conversation, what we could bring as a support from our allies, which is the country that we've helped build and that we have equity in. And if, going to Africa means cashing it out, that's what it means. But Julius, the floor is yours.
No, what I was gonna say is, well, I knew my answer. No, I forgot what the question was. But I was gonna say, target the children. Target the children. You're saying to be able to move that spending power. Some people are never gonna be down with Africa. Some people, and I'm talking people like us, Black people. So what part of my secondary project in terms of the Pan-African Saturday class is because I see the difference in me raising my children with this mindset. And I see the conversations they're having at school with their teachers. You cannot pull certain things over them. And I get emails from school and I respond and so on. But my kids understand they are doing what they're supposed to do to get that piece of paper at the end of the day, but they're not going to be fooled. So we need to really go after our children, because guess what? They're going after our children. I don't know what the situation like is in Canada, in the States, but in Canada, it's very bad, the things that they're telling our children. So we need to make sure our children are learning our history, not from their perspective, but from our own perspective, written by Black authors, written by Black historians. And that's what the decolonization project is all about, which is why I'm so passionate about it, which is why I've gotten offers for funding, and I'm like, no, I'm going to go crowdfunding, because I'm not changing a thing. If it doesn't fit in with creating Pan-Africans, it's not, I don't want the money. And the reason why I'm this way is because when you look at African leaders who all go to school in America, or most of them actually in Europe, they're Europeans. I don't care what they say. That's the system you were exposed to. So you're going to make rules, you're going to make business deals with them in mind, and not your own people, which is so. I will probably not live to see what I want to see. Maybe not even my kids, but I'm hoping my grandkids will. So we need to focus also on the children. We cannot leave them out. We need to really get their minds in, because if you have an African product in front of them and a one made in China, chances are they're going to look at the African product as inferior and not want it. So that $1 trillion is probably not gonna. It's going to take a while. We're going to have to shift the mindset to get to the pocketbooks.
Yeah,
start the mindset from young. Thank you.
Thank you. I think a part of that might have to do with how you frame it, how you position it, how you talk about it, and that's, I think, what you're talking about. Is we need to start creating our own narrative. We need to start creating our history. Needs to be our story, not his story. Right. Verite.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also wanted to talk about where we're investing. Yeah, and part of what I saw is that when you're investing in the cities, in Kigali, or in already somehow somewhere developed in an African context or in a Rwandan context, if you're investing in a sector that is already developed, then there will be some strings attached to the application process, because there's someone already there, probably someone more powerful in that country, and who doesn't want opposition. But when you're going to the villages, then it's way, very easy, because you're going to somewhere people do not want to go. And I'm sure, like you said, there needs to be a benefit for the person who is coming in. But the primary context of this was creating equity and developing the regions in Africa. So what I can say is that if the people are coming in more also focusing on the areas where there is underrepresentation in investment or that people do not want to go, then the government is really easy on that. For example, if you come and you want to go to the poorest sector in Rwanda and go to the poorest area in Rwanda, and you have your 20,000 US dollars, I'm sure there will be an exception. I was reading on our website of the Rwanda Development Board, and they say that there are some exceptions made for different sectors, and this cannot be achieved by just one application. That's why you need to sit with the people who are in charge of this and be able to say, I'm investing in this certain area. Yeah, thank you. And I also wanted to ask Mr. Julius, who signs the petition? Is it only African descendants who are abroad, or is it everyone on African continent? Or I also had in mind that there are some other descendants who are in the UK, who are in the European countries, who might want to join this initiative. So who can sign the petition? Thank you.
Anybody can sign the petition. Anybody, any descendant, any continental African, anybody who wants to see us have the right to go home. And even I see people from Uganda say, I want to go back to Africa, but I don't want to go to Uganda. I want to go to Mozambique. So it's once you're African, we want you to be able to go anywhere in Africa. So it's for Africans all over the world.
Yeah, please share the petition. I'll share it in some of the groups so that everyone can be signing if they're interested. Thank you.
So, Julius, early on in the conversation, you made a statement I just wanted to touch on. You said, giving investments or grants or loans, I'm not sure which one it was, but in relation to the decolonization program, and you said it's not a lot of money. But I think in reality, in the countries that you're operating in, $500 is a significant amount of money. And if you're providing that as startup capital, seed capital for individuals, that's especially across a broad range, because the community is interconnected. If you give 5 people in that community $500, then you've created $2,500 in economic investment. But then the things that they do with that money just continues to grow and feed. And especially in the rural areas like Verite was talking about, that could have a significant impact. And then I like you, Julius, forgot what I was going to say for the second part. So I'll pass it on to Kenny.
Okay, am I muted? Can y'all hear me?
Oh, wait, Kenny, I'm sorry, if I could. What I was going to say is that the concept of giving out $500, Ricardo, my thought was relative to the congressional concessions is that, if there was a fund set up that allowed African Americans who, have certain business credentials or acumen or whatever it is, or apply for a program, that they could actually make these type of micro investments in these rural communities as a way of generating income for themselves, starting businesses, become essentially financiers of these, rural development projects, et cetera, that might be something that would be a good conversation with the CBC about setting up a fund set aside for African Americans returning to the diaspora with the capacity to make micro guarantees or micro investments in these different communities that they want to set up in. It limits the exposure from a financial standpoint. And if you could put some controls in the ground where people can verify that these are actual investments that are being made, it could have a tremendous impact on building up the community around you that you're actually going to go settle in. I'm sorry, King.
No, I'm going to say I'm really excited about the petition. I like the whole concept and idea. It's just my mind is thinking about a lot of different things, especially when you talk about, the CBC also getting involved, or if possible, bringing that to see it. I'm interested in what he's already written, or how many pages the petition is and what all it says and targets. I know he wanted to keep it a simple thing, but I'm thinking like on a mindset also, it's just, I don't know if you can have addendums or attachments or things like that, but to make it sort of like a living document to where it can be updated, and the petition is something can be digitized or put in the hands of people on hard copies, or people can go to it online and read it and sign it, and then people can put on their sites or send it, links and things like that to really start to promote it and get it around, and then have a fundraising mechanism attached to it. Things like this is really, really good. Then as projects are completed, projects are done, it's just a lot of things I'm thinking about that works with this petition, with the technologies that we have in place already, instead of just doing it like an old past, slow and whatnot. It can be something that's once put in play online or something like that. It can keep things moving in a really steady and strong pace. And the ideas that we all have already brought to the table, I think, are, really good, ideas already just with the petition itself. So I think a lot of people here in the States would be interested just in this conversation alone, and just in the opportunities on the new frontiers in Africa, and the pioneering aspect of Africa, and in the development and resources within our community in Africa. So those language and that things I want to put in our vernacular, to put in our community, to start to understand exactly what it is we're looking for, and what it is, that is happening, so that people will feel comfortable being a part of it, putting money into it, and traveling to be a part of. They'll know what they're traveling to be a part of and what they're doing, not just signing something and saying, all right, bye, good luck, make it a living document. Yeah.
Mr. Johnson.
What I love, Chris, about the forum that you've created is you've been able to bring in people who view the world from different perspectives. I think, Kenny and I probably look at the world very differently. The last two things he said, I 100% agree with, which actually concerns me a little bit, but 100% agree with both of the things that I think, to underscore Kenny's first point or 2 points ago, is that the journey along this kind of individual participation and talking about that, it roots this process in a way that makes it less flimsy. It makes it less transactional, which is probably a better word. So I completely agree with the point that Kenny was making there, that as we begin to kind of codify with our words, with our experience, with our perspective, this kind of individual tie to this process, what it does is it brings on expanded meaning. So Kenny, I couldn't agree with you more. And then the last point you just made, that as it becomes this living document, what happens with social media and the points that he's making is it begins to evolve beyond. Now, the thing that I think is, again, and Rashawn made a point last week I thought was really, I actually wanted to call him afterwards and say this concept around one truth. What I love, the reason why I immediately leaned into what Julius said, Julius reached into his pocket and bought land. A lot of times in my life, I hear people talk about what they want to do, what they don't want to do, this, that, and the other, with really no substantive risk to themselves. So if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, somebody else got hurt. Somebody else lost something. Somebody else did this, that, and the other. But to hear the kind of investment that Julius has made was, I spent my money, then I brought my family, then I taught my kids. What, at least to me, listening to what is that, I'm like, that brother is all in. Now I don't know if there's one road to this. I think that when we're talking about these things, there may be people who absolutely agree with the destination that Julius is hoping to do, but completely disagree with the path. concept around sovereignty is not something that should be given up lightly. Sovereignty, by definition, is supreme power. So for a nation with a history of colonization, for Westerners to say, we want you to open up your doors and whoever wants to come in here can, seems to me to be, given history, problematic. Best case. Worst case, I think it is almost impossible to expect a nation to say, come on. Now, I think if we marry the things that I have mentioned, that I think Julius has done, if everybody is Julius Brown, come on. But everybody ain't going to be Julius Brown. And so this idea around what Chris is talking about, and really what I want to dive really, I will pick up my sword and follow Kenny on those last 2 points. I do think it is critical to be able to do that. And then the last thing that I want to say is, and I think is super important here, is that this idea that we can exist separate and apart from an ecosystem that controls the vast majority of wealth in the world, I think is not simply naive. What I also think is that it surrenders a ROI that we deserve to have because a cost has been meted out in our community. And to abandon it is to abandon what I believe is something owed us. And so, I'm going to work through communities. I'm going to work through politics. I'm going to work through all of the things that are being said here. And I'm not going to say no to anything unless I take a good look at it and say that it doesn't get us where we want to go, or it makes it impossible for us to get us to where we go. Beyond that, I'm open to listen to all people who are trying to do the things I'm trying to do.
Excellent. So I think there's a couple of things that I take away from that. And one is that, we come from a country that has a lot of prominence in the world. And we help participate in the building of that country, and the benefits that come along with being associated with it should not be given up lightly.
Amen.
And we need to leverage that, which is one of the reasons I suggested tribal recognition, because it allows me to keep my passport, right? And that's part of the equity that I built up, is the freedom that this passport of movement, it gives me. But I also have a deep sense of belonging to the African community as well, as if I'm from here. Right? I was forcibly removed. I didn't decide to leave. I didn't get on a plane and fly out. So I believe that you can mesh those two things together in some way, shape, or form that might make sense somehow. Julius.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with having multiple passports. Rich Caucasians do it. They collect passports from all over the world. So there's nothing wrong with having both. I watch a lot of YouTube and a lot of Black Americans, and they're proud to be Americans, and there's nothing wrong with that. So there's not, Jay Cameron says he has a bicontinental life. Listen, brother, man, do that. You don't need to give up the passport. In terms of sacrifice, listen, I am not a rich man. That $100,000 is a HELOC on my house. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is. You understand? If it fails, it's not just affecting me, it's affecting my family. So that's my level of commitment to it. When it comes to the petition, to answer the questions, the petition is online. I just gave a link to the website where to my website, and you can go and click it and it will take you to the petition. Is the petition, can it be a living document? Absolutely. I am not a PhD. I'm a simple guy. So if there's someone out there who is definitely more learned than me and is willing to want to add something to the petition, I'm not against that. What no one is going to match me in is passion and commitment. That I have, and I will continue to move forward. So I will accept the help from anywhere as long as the help fits within the confines that we are focused Pan-Africans, and we don't come and try and change our language. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, which means I agree in Hebrew. Verite, you had your hand up, you put it back down. I don't know what you got going on over there, but now you have to say something.
Yeah, I think it was a question and it got resolved. No worries.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, please.
One of the things that I wanted to say that I think is really critical. This is it's a big place. Even though I haven't been there, as I've done a lot of work with governments on the continent. And really one of the challenges that we've had, if we talk about, Moses not being able to lead you out of Egypt, can't lead you into the promised land. You have too much blood on your hands. This idea around Winston Churchill moving the empire through World War II, and then the next election he's defeated. This idea that they're wartime leaders, that they're peacetime leaders, that they're horses for tracks. And this idea, from my perspective, when I'm listening last week to the conversation that Kenny and I were having, or the conversation has had this idea around passion, the purity of the idea. There is a authenticity in Julius's conversation and in his actions that is very appealing to me. My process is different. My process is different than Kenny's. My process, Chris, you're as close to me as any person walking the planet, and we disagree sometimes on how things are done. But what I do believe is, as I was joking before about how absolutely right Kenny was, one of the things that I said in the last show is that there is no one truth. That there are going to be times when the army must be led by Kenny. There are going to be times when the army must be led by Verite. There are times when the army must be led by Julius. And what we have to be as part of the diaspora is humble enough to know that message is for this day. That effort is for this outcome. And that it not be the situation where this is how I see it. And because this is how I see it, this is the only way it can be. And so for me, Chris, and listen, you and I are best friends, so that we see this solution similarly doesn't surprise me. I've spent the vast majority of my adult life talking to you about concepts like this. So, you're gonna influence me and vice versa. But what I do as people listen to this, what I want them to be is inspired by Kenny, and inspired by Verite, and inspired by Julius. I am inspired by all of you, but also to understand that the enormity of this opportunity requires multiple voices, and that if we can sing in concert with one another, that's how we really get a hit here. And so, I want to make sure that I am always concerned when I hear about purity tests. I'm concerned when I start hearing people talk about, in the Republican Party, they call them rhinos, Republican in name only. Once you start heading down that path, that you define what Black is, that you define what African is, when you define what is a true effort and what isn't, that your definition is the purest form of that, we are limiting our opportunity to grow, but we are also limiting the opportunity to bring people in who might hear you and say, there's something that you're saying that resonates with me, but not all of what you're saying. But if I have to subscribe to all of what you're saying in order to join you, then I'm not. And so what I want to be able to do as people listen to this is to understand that there will be truths that each of us say. And if you can connect to that, to become involved in this, then please do. Please be connected to that, and that expand this voice and expand this tent to achieve these objectives.
So our highlight reel from last discussion had a prominent feature from Ricardo, and I think he's close to repeating that that honor again. But Kenny Styles, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in project management and the projects things, they can simplify themselves. We don't always, like I said last week, or the last recording, is we don't always have to agree on everything. You know, it's about detailing line by line on the things that we do agree on, and the resources and the connections and the people that we do have at the table that are willing to get dirty, you know, because this is not a clean, project. It's going to be something that's going to take sweat, tears, time away from family, and, years. So the conversation that I'm looking at and I'm willing to work with and have, again, that we are having is again, resource development, management, understanding our people, understanding the people that are helping in the projects, and the things that are written down that are detailed, bringing awareness to who we are, what we are doing, and being laser focused on time frames. This project 6 months, that project 12 months, this project we agree, we disagree, but we need to have these time frames on projects and financial budgets for each project, whether it's given to us or donated to us from our community, or whether it's coming down from political powers or political bodies, no strings attached type details. And then what do we do with that? How many people are we going to impact? How many people are we going to help and work with and relate with there on the continent versus here in America? What are the needs of the people here in the States, American soil, to travel or to be here and work on projects, the ones that want to stay and do things here, and the ones that want to go and do things there? How do we coordinate with those different footprints, So there's a lot of things that goes through my mind when I'm listening and being on this platform and having these conversations. Chris, I know you're really good at writing and managing and talking and speaking and organizing also. So I'm just excited to see, what we come up with in the time frame in which we put it together, and then how many people we can reach and get involved with this. So, that's where I am.
I would like to make thank you, Kenny. I would like to make a couple points. Number one, Verite, can you come off of mute for a second?
Yeah.
Verite, where were you born?
Can you repeat that?
Where were you born?
In Rwanda, Kigali.
Okay. So I'd like everybody to take note that in every time that Verite spoke, he used the words we and our. If we can accomplish that with our brothers across the water on a consistent basis, where we're using the words when we're talking to each other, we and our, then we've accomplished everything that we need to accomplish through our actions and our dialogues, because that's the type of unity that we need when we're talking about collective action. And we're talking not about these Americans here and these Africans here, these Burundians here and these Tanzanians there. When we say we and our, we're effective. We're actually where we need to be. I had another point, but that was the most important one. So I'll come back to my next point when I remember it. Who's up?
I'll go up. Kenny, I will send you a link to my Dropbox. The documents are all there. Even the curriculum that I wrote myself, and I'm no teacher. A lot of research went into this. My wife was not happy. But yeah, you can definitely, I'll give you access. All of you guys, you can go in and see what we've been working on, and any feedback would be greatly appreciated. Any assistance in terms of sharing and signing the petition, greatly appreciated. And suggestions, bring them on, definitely. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
That's my email right there. I just put in the chat.
So as a follow-up, Julius, what I would like to do is us to have a brief call and talk about some of the terms on the petition, and see if I can get the Y'all Life community behind it based upon some of the things that you have, and go about the process of knocking out those 10,000 signatures that are necessary or that are targeted. So if you have some time in the next day or so, I'd like to do it quickly and see if we can't get that moving. Ricardo, you have a meeting with the CBC coming up, and I know you're talking personal business, but quite candidly, you are the voice of a tribe or of a nation within a nation, and to the extent that you could have some conversations about, and not even to the sense of reparations, right? It's more to the standpoint of, from an American standpoint, we build up equity, and we want to determine how some of it's distributed. And we think that focusing it on the communities that we came from would be an important thing for our development culturally and economically as a people that are, equity holders in this country. The last thing that I'll say, and before Ricardo lets you speak, is that I've had this thought many times when people say, "I'm Rwandan, I'm Burundi," and I say, "Look, Rwanda is not my country, but Rwandans are my people." And I mean that. Rwandans are my people, but Rwanda is not my country. It's a nation that grew out of tragedy and turmoil. It's a corporate body, a product of the Belgium and the French, that's controlled by international levers. But the people, when you start getting down to the people, we connect. We say we and we say our. Mr. Johnson.
So, as I said, I'm going to be, meeting. I took some notes from the message from the last show. And so these are the things that I'm going to just be in that conversation is, this idea around market research. This is actually something I got from Verite. One, understanding what's going on in these communities and how we connect. There's long lists underneath this, but I'll just do in respect for the time. So market research, local partnerships, adapting to local need, sustainable solutions, regulatory compliance, technology and innovation, infrastructure investment, education and training, localization, risk mitigation, networking, financing, patience and persistence, CSR, which is an acronym in the United States for corporate social responsibility. There are budgets in place for corporate partners that are aside for that, for CSR, community engagement, and then scalability. So I am going there for, my private business, but I've actually put together, this is a pretty, it's a 6-page deck of information coming out of the notes from our last meeting and conversations that Chris and I have had. So it is something that I'm pretty serious about. My deal is I want to be in heaven 3 days before the devil knows I'm dead. I don't want to sit around and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Generally, if I'm trying to kill something, you'll know it as your heart stops. I'm not trying to have a conversation where I go, hey, this is all the stuff's going to happen. Nope. I listened to what Kenny said and what Rashawn said, what Verite said, and I put together a plan, and I'm gonna get on a plane and go talk to people who I know have access to money and to power, and then see if I can get them to agree. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. But what I do think is important is the work that is being done, this important work that Y'all Life is doing, the important work that Kenny does in the community, this work now that Julius is doing, my brother from Canada, from Jamaica, who is African. That's a beautiful answer. It's a beautiful answer. And so from my perspective, what I want to be able to do is provide wind to these sails in a way that is authentic to me. I bristle around a rejection of nationalism. My family died on this planet. My tribe, they have blood on this continent. And I am very passionate about not ceding that sacrifice. I want Jewish grandchildren to benefit not simply from the efforts done on the continent, but also to benefit from the efforts done on this continent, and to build a bridge in a way that has reciprocity, that has sustainability, and that is what my efforts are going to be.
One more point. This is actually, this is a international initiative for these things that Julius is talking about, the things that we're talking about on this call. It has been declared the Decade for People of African Descent by the United Nations, which was running between 2014 and 2024. So there is an international mandate for countries that are party to the UN to actually facilitate recognition, justice, and reparation for these atrocities that our communities have faced. So this is not something that you should be taking lightly as if you're doing independently. We need to very quickly put together some plans in place to force them to live up to the commitment that they made to people of African descent. And we're running out of time in order to get that done. Kenny.
I want to address this to Ricardo and ask a couple of questions. First, I want to just say, Ricardo, if you haven't heard from me, I know we probably have some differences, but I want to say first, personally, thank you for putting yourself out there to the CBC and also on in this conversation. As I understand it, you're a heavy hitter, and you carry a lot of weight, and you have a big opinion and a mindset that can rectify or correct and or destroy, this type of thing. So with the moves and the things that you're doing, I think it's a two-front. I think we can have a conversation about a two-front operation, because we have, like I said before, a front in America and we have a front of people in Africa. Not everyone is going to want to go back, like the other brother said earlier, Julius. But for the way I'm looking at it is, for the certain percent of people that in America that want to, that are trying to, or would like the opportunity, here's the situation that I want to paint the picture in your mind. If I got it. Okay. You said hurry up. I can't hear you, Chris. You muted.
You're kind of muffled.
You were muffled.
I'm sorry, I'm muffled. Okay, I'm sorry, I have my thumb over my phone. Here's a picture that I would like to paint in your mind, if you will. Is I don't know how much y'all heard or what you didn't hear, but for the people that want to go back, the situation of history that was changed is that somebody made a decision to put us on ships and bring us to the Americas a long time ago. And the reparations conversation is just a correction of that mistake, or that process of building, or whatever we want to call it, in that history. We as a Black community, is what I believe Chris is also looking at, have a certain, nowadays, we have a certain freedom, right? And I believe we have the same power that they had, if not more today than what they had back then when they brought us over here. You get what I'm saying? To make ships, to do the same thing. They pooled, P-O-O-L-E-D, they pooled their money together and built ships for exploration and came across the ocean. For the ones that want to return, what type of programs do we have that, or can we put together as Americans, as Black men or people educated, to help people that want to repatriate back to the continent of Africa, that want to go back? There is no assistance program. There is no reparations or monies there that is allocated. Now, governments allocate billions of dollars towards things. We know this, but there is no conversation of governments allocating money towards the return of Americans that want to return back to the continent. Where is those monies, and how can we get those to accomplish things like I said earlier, plane tickets, pay for the plane tickets. Just pay for people that want to fly back, pay for the plane tickets. Or, certain things, room and board, passports. So having those type of conversations where we say, okay, we got $1 million or $1 billion or whatever that we want to give back for this repatriation project or some of these projects, we'll put it towards people's plane tickets, a certain percentage or a certain percentage of the passports and things like that can be asked for that. And if there's no assistance, there's no love, there's no desire, there's no want to help people that want to go back but can't, then what are we having a conversation about is we have to find a way because we want to ourselves. So either we get help from uppers or we don't. But at the end of the day, we have to still continue to make moves. We don't want to be held back to anybody's controls of who goes and who doesn't. So we have to answer those type of hard questions.
Thank you, Kenny. Mr. Johnson.
Kenny, thank you, bro. I appreciate it. And I want to say, man, this has been really edifying for me, man. Most of what you said today, I 100% agree with. Here's what I would say. I really want to speak to the sovereignty of these nations. And I do think that there is a Western bias. If I were Kenyan or Ugandan or I just had my ancestry, so my people are from the Congo, and I heard we're trying as these nations. Let's say that I'm Rwandan. We're trying to feed our people. We're trying to employ our people. We're trying to create infrastructure and this, that, and the other. And then from the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, there is this influx of more people. And that really all they're doing is coming to the country. They needed airplane tickets purchased for them. They needed this, they needed that, this, and the other. If I lived in that country, that doesn't sound like a very attractive idea. What I liked about the conversation that Kenny had initially and the conversation that Julius is talking about is he's not talking about moving to a country. He's talking about building a business in a country that creates revenue and jobs and these kinds of things that establishes a value transaction. And that this, now what my understanding is from the time that I did business on the continent, you can do business in the countries that I worked with for 3 years. And then depending on the value, there could be taxation or not. After 3 years, you have to make a request for citizenship or for this or for those kind of things. That was 5 years ago, so it's been a while. So I don't know if things have changed, but that was what the process was. I think it is important for us, for the dignity of the individuals that are going to the continent and respecting the people who are there, that there be a value proposition and that value proposition responds to a need inside those communities in a way that reflects mutual value. And in doing so, I think that's how you create opportunity, sustainability, and the uplifting of all people and involved in the process.
Thanks, Ricardo. Julius, you're up. But first, Verity, let me ask you a question to think on while Julius is going to make his next statement. What can the Africans in Africa do to help facilitate this process that we're talking about? Like, there's a push and then there's a pull. And there's communities in Africa that also have a voice and can speak about these issues, about the return of the African Americans. What is it that we could reasonably expect for them to do to help ease and facilitate this process? Julius, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, this is why I said earlier, we have to be careful because Sierra Leone was the freed slaves went back to Sierra Leone, didn't they? And eventually caused a civil war. We have to be careful. We do have to think of a country's sovereignty. Ghana does give you free land. You pay an administrative fee. I think it might cost the average person $1,200, and you get a 70 by 100 plot of land. You can. That program is still ongoing. People can take advantage of it. I don't know necessarily if paying someone to go to Africa and to live there, you're paying them to live there, is necessarily the right way. Africa requires a certain mindset. And if you're leaving with a very Western mindset and being thrown in Africa, and your only form of any resources the government check, what if a policy changes later on? So there has to be a level of we have to be careful with that kind of request. So I do think if you go into a village and you create a farm and you hire people on the farm, I think that's a better way to go than the government buy a piece of land and just put a bunch of Americans there who are on assistance or something. I don't necessarily know if I would agree with something like that.
So I think the support to go back in terms of buying a ticket for everybody may be misguided, but maybe it's funding to provide a reconditioning program to help people acclimate to Africa before they actually come back. Because there's a lot of these brothers I wouldn't want to come back to Africa with me, because I don't want to have to deal with the mess they're going to create. But if they go through some type of
Yeah, we can't hear you, Chris.
Okay, I think I can go ahead and answer the question as we're trying to figure it out. Yeah. There are very many various things that Africans can do in order to support the initiative, but I will just speak of a few of them that just came up to my mind right now. First is understanding and not viewing this as a point of competition, and rather as an area of corroboration. Yeah, because people can have different perspective around things. Some people do not understand things. So first thing from African locals is understanding that this is not a competition. This is rather an opportunity to corroborate and be able to improve and, corroborate around these areas of economic and raising the living standards of everyone. Something else is also African leaders having the political will. While actually we're having this talk, I was trying to look on who are the leaders in Africa that we can always invite in this kind of show, so that we can get ideas from them and get to know what they would like, what they think about this initiative. But something else from African locals from our end is having the political will to support this kind of initiatives. And this is where we also remove the strings that we've been talking about, like what Julius faced when he was in Kenya. So the political will to provide the simplest possible way in order to accommodate African descendants coming back to the continent. Yeah, so another thing is interaction from, I will speak from a youth perspective, because if you're aware, 75% of African population is youth. So the whole population needs to critically or importantly to interact with these initiatives that are being brought about. For example, what Julius was saying in terms of providing the $500 to help a person. If there is no African to participate in this kind of initiative, then you understand that this will fail. If there is a business, if an African American invests in a business in Rwanda and no one wants to use those services for a certain point because of a belief or white mindset that is out there, then this will fail. People will not want to come back. So those were my three critical points that African locals need to do. viewing this perspective from a collaboration point and not a competition point, and also having the political will to provide the simplest way, and also being able to interact with these businesses and being able to interact with these people coming in. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe Chris's internet Chris's internet has dropped. Is everyone still here? So we have everybody still here, but it seems he still has a connection. Any closing? Any? We'll just go around the table and just make closing remarks, and just close out the show. And if we can't get him back on here, anybody want to start the closing remarks?
You know, what I'd love to be able to do too, thank you, Kenny. I think one of the things that's important is I came away from the last show and then Chris's is that, you know, what did I learn and what am I going to do? I really enjoy this concept, as Kenny said a few times, boots on the ground. I think it is something that all of us, you know, our boots on the ground are going to be different places. They're going to be doing different things. But, you know, the thing that I really appreciate, Julius, today is this idea around understanding what the policies are, what the processes are, and then figuring out, you know, basically how do you get in where you fit in. So that's what I've learned. I've already talked about kind of what my next steps are going to be, is to really be able to come back to the community with some perspectives from people outside of this conversation, but inside this community, from an institutional standpoint, and then from a political standpoint, and then say, okay, based on that, you know, where can we connect? Where is there common ground? And then what can we use those resources to achieve these objectives? So that's what I learned, and that's what I'm going to be doing next.
All right. Okay. Ricardo, can you? I think Chris is asking me to finish it up, but when is the meeting that you're going to have? When is that meeting, and will it be before the next show or the next time we meet up?
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'll be there for Wednesday through Sunday. This coming.
Okay. All right. So I'm just trying to get some closing objectives. So I guess that'll be one objective that we accomplished, or just learning about doing this episode. And the petition that Julius has put together. And I think brother Verita, you have your hands up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I also wanted to second what Ricardo was saying about having points of action at the end of every show. It might not be within the show, but for example, if we have someone taking minutes, I think Chris is going to be working on this, find this kind of person. Someone who is taking minutes, so that by the end, we know we've talked about this and we're going to work on this in the next few days. Will help us not just talk like many politicians do, but also be actors. And something else to improve the show and the participation of, you know, listeners is trying to use social media. I'm not sure how it goes around within Canada and the States, but in Africa, social media is really being used heavily. And if we can always get this on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on Instagram before the show starts, then we'll have people attending this and people contributing to this. Yeah, for example, some of the podcasts I attended, they have a 90-minute way of talking, and then at the end, they have like 10 or 15 minutes for the participants to ask some other questions that were not thought before. yeah, I think I will leverage my relationship with Chris and then talk to him after this show to talk on these points, but it will be very helpful to the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Verite. I think that right now we have all kind of sort of found our positioning really well together, and I think that's going to only get larger and grow as we continue to have these conversations. Would like to invite more people or anyone to come into the show or watching the show to also, come to participate or get with Chief Chris and want to add to our platform or come to the conversation. The petition, Julius, if you want to have some closing remarks on the petition and some actionable points that you would like to see come out of it for your petition.
Thanks. I just want to say thanks for inviting me. I'm very educational, and I can see I kind of fit in. I found my tribe now. So that's a good thing. Yeah, I'll put the link out. Feel free to share the link. Review the website. It's everything is me. I'm doing it on my own, basically. I have somebody who helps with the actual website of it. And I might invite him over here as well. He's in Kenya. He's in Kenya. And so, any assistance would be greatly appreciated. My takeaway from here is when you're doing your next show, send me the link ahead of time. I will put it on Twitter. I will put it on, we have a Credea Twitter account and we have a small Instagram account, but we can put it out. And I'll boost it as well. I'll have it run for a couple of days because I pay for the Credea ads to go out. So by all means.
Awesome. Thank you, Brother Julius. Thanks, everybody. We're going to close out. I think that the petition will be, we'll have a link on there and we'll have the video put up, edited, and put out really soon again, video number 2. So it's been really good. Thank everybody for showing. Thank you, Chief Chris, for putting this all together, bro. And we're just gonna keep growing, keep talking, and keep coming together. So be blessed, community. And that's it. Signing out.
That is, we had an engaging discussion today, and we came away with some action items. Some things that we need to get done as global Africans in order to make a more prosperous and stable Africa. I'll see you on next week's episode.